Okay, so hello everybody out in YouTube land. My name is Bennet Tchaikovsky, and I've got a former student of mine here, Mandeep, who has the coolest name of all time. It sounds like you're like a 70s crime villain, which is like really kind of sweet, like out of like one of those 90s. It's a great name. Um, and in any event, Mandeep is contacting me today just to kind of go through and to kind of understand a little bit more about IBC 30 to CPA and in terms of recruiting. And I asked if I could record him. So Mandeep, thank you for allowing me to do this. And as I always preface all my videos, these are our opinions and not the opinions of anybody else, including but not limited to the South Orange County Community College District and Irvine Valley College. And really, I think we can all kind of like learn from others. And this is why when I do my office hours, I always try to have as many people on as I possibly can. So Mandeep, how are you? Everything good?
I'm good. I'm
Cool.
good. Just enjoying my summer.
Okay, well, we're going to try to enjoy it a little bit more. We got to get ourselves a full-time job offer secured, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
tell me kind of where you are right now in your educational journey. How have you already been taking classes at Cal State Fullerton? Are you just leaving IVC to start at Cal State Fullerton? Where are you right now in your journey?
So I just completed my first year around at Fullerton. I transferred over in fall of 2024. Just completed the fall and spring semester, taking a summer class, and then I'll be graduating in December of 2026.
Okay. So, and when you went to Cal State Fullerton this past year, did you attend Meet the Firms? Did you join the accounting society or did you join Beta Alpha Psi? Like, what did you do to kind of put yourself out there?
Right. So I joined all that stuff in my spring semester because in the fall I broke my ankle on the first day. So
Okay.
I kind of couldn't do anything except
Wow.
focus on school.
Okay.
So I joined AS, I joined BAP, and so I did go to all the Meet the Firm, speaker meetings, and social events. I
Okay.
did all that.
And when you went to those meetings and when you went to the Meet the Firms and the like, did you bring your resume with you or how did you try to connect with recruiters after those events?
So I would try to find some like mutual ground, something during the meeting of where I felt we had mutual ground. So we didn't particularly talk about just the accounting world, but like something outside of the accounting world where I can ask them a little bit about themselves and what they do outside of work, what I do outside of college and work. And so we kind of build that connection that isn't just strictly for like a career purposes.
Okay. Awesome. And so I guess the other thing too, I would just kind of say is so what accounting classes have you taken so far? Like where are you in terms of taking 301A, 301B, 302? Where are you in terms of the courses?
So I've done the ones at IVC. I just recently in the spring semester, I took 301A.
Okay.
I'm in 301B right now
This
over the
summer?
summer.
Oh
This summer.
wow. Okay. That's great because obviously the more accounting classes you've kind of gone through and completed, the easier it's going to kind of go through MB through. So part of the reason why I'm doing this with you is I know that you went to IBC 30s to CPA and you said it was overwhelming, which means that I need to do a better job of making it less overwhelming. So let's go ahead and take a look at my screen right over here. So the first thing that I try to help students with, and the reason why this is so important is that when you meet with a recruiter, the recruiter just imagine like a large draft board. And what they're trying to do is to say, okay, are we going to have Mandeep start for us full time? And so when you're going to these events, it's really kind of important to know when are you going to have your 150 semester unit requirement done. And so right over here, if I switch this to my IVC 30 to CPA, and okay, perfect. So we did this mapping a little while ago, right? But over here, so far, like this, I think was mapped through like probably like last spring, right? So the first thing I would want you to kind of go through and do is to update your classes. And we can kind of do this right now. So you're right now at Cal State Fullerton, you're taking, so right over here, we've got spring 25. And then we have summer 25 accounting 301A, which is intermediate 1, and accounting 301B, which is intermediate 2. And Mandeep, what I would want you to kind of go through and do is to update, just like list at the bottom of your mapping, basically the other accounting courses you've kind of have gone through and taken. Just it'll be, or any other classes you've kind of gone through and taken. So just whatever you took in the fall semester when the ankle broke, and then whatever you took in the, I'm sure that wasn't a gambling debt, right? That was like legit ankle break. Like, was this like
No,
was this basketball late at night, or what was this?
no. So it was literally like the first day of classes, and so my
Oh,
friend, my friend and I didn't want to drive, so we got like e-scooters. So we were gonna take like the metro, because from Irvine, it's only like a 15-minute ride from the metro.
okay.
And so the class that ended, we were coming back, and I kind of lost balance and fell. And so I like dislocated my ankle and fractured my fibia, and
Okay.
then went from e-scooters to knee scooter.
Oh man, sorry about that,
Yeah,
dude. Actually, I like that e-scooter to e-scooter.
yeah,
I almost want to be like Better Call Saul and say, okay, Mandeep, I'm going to help you with your case, right? So
yeah.
I'm not that kind of attorney, right? So what I want you to do is go ahead and finish updating this. And the reason why this becomes so important is when the first thing is when we look at resumes, and what you can kind of see over here is I've included 2 different sample resumes in IBC 30 to CPA. So by the way, just before I go too quickly, right, you want to start basically over here with like the modules page. And if I'm looking at this view as a student, this is kind of what I'm going to go through and see, right? So right over here is you're basically going to see over here like the sample resume, right? So you would click on the first sample resume, and then you would come over here, and then this is what it would be. And what's really important when you do this, right, is you want to make sure that you have, like, obviously you're on LinkedIn because that's how we just set this up. You want to make sure that all of your stuff is kind of like, okay, your objective is going to change every time you kind of go through and do it. Cal State Fullerton, when do you expect to graduate? Your CPA eligible upon graduation, also your cumulative GPA as well as your accounting GPA. Like note, and I know this because you're in BAP, you have to have above like a 3.25. But Mandeep, if your accounting GPA was like a 2.0, right, you want to be prepared to kind of talk to recruiters to kind of say, yeah, man, I was traveling the world and all this crazy stuff happened. Well, maybe not that excuse, but you would want to come up with like I was working 90 hours a week, something along just to kind of explain, give context to the GPA.
Okay.
So here you're going to list out what your experience has been. And by the way, this can be, what kind of jobs have you had, Mandeep?
So I've only had one job at Ralph's where I'm a
Oh, great.
cashier.
Perfect. Okay. Did you get yelled at by people?
I do, yeah.
Awesome. Right. So where's my coupon? I wanted this discount, right?
Yes.
Obviously, that's perfect, right? Because you have to learn how to de-escalate situations, right? That's a great job to have. So make sure you put that on there, because then, oh, like at the end of every shift, I'm reconciling my cash register with whatever the ticker tape is, like all those kinds of things. It's absolutely perfect for as you're kind of going through and applying for positions, right? So obviously the resume, having the resume locked up and looking good is really important. And then again, for any of you watching, if you want me to go through and do this for you, as you can see from right over here, I've never done this before. Like, look at all this. All these are my different former students. If you message me, I will basically create an individualized Google Sheet for you. You input in the units and the classes you've taken, and I will try to quickly sort through it as quickly as possible. So, but coming back over here, so that's the basics, right? When you go in to meet the firms or when you go to these recruiting events, you really have to kind of go through and just basically make sure that, hey, you've got these things in place, right? Now, the next thing, the next resource, which I would say is probably one of the most important things that I've done, is I have gone through and I've held 3 Meet the Firms meetings. I started these back in spring of 2023. And I went through actually the spring 23, but that was only 2 of them. But I started doing this in fall of 2023. And what you're gonna kind of see is like when you look at this, you're gonna see about an hour-long meeting with me essentially interviewing the recruiters at these different firms as well as former firm personnel. And what's kind of cool about these recordings is that it's a lot of my former students that I'm getting to interview. And so I try to ask really, really candid conversations. So as you're going through and looking at these different, going through and looking at these different meetings, some of these went through and they provided me with PowerPoints. Obviously, this is from fall 23. We're about to go into fall 25. So the most current meetings are going to be the ones that I just did here this past spring, right? So you want to make sure that you're going through these. I also have the recruiter contacts within all of these different parts. And so, and some of the firms did basically, they provided me with a PowerPoint presentation. But the reason why, Mandeep, I'm showing you these videos and I want you to watch them. By the way, these are all unlisted videos. You can't get to the videos unless you have access to this Google Sheet, which if you're a part of IBC 30 to CPA, if you're a part of UCI Accounting Association, UCI BAP, Chapman, any of the local area schools, feel free to reach out to me and I'll provide you links to this. But the reason why I want you to be watching this is I've had students say, for example, they've watched the recruiting videos, say from BDO, and they've watched because I've interviewed BDO. If you kind of go back over here, I interviewed them in spring of 25. I interviewed them in fall of 2024. But the reason why you want to go through and watch these videos is you're going to learn how these firms recruit, right? They're longer videos, like many of the videos that I make on YouTube, Mandeep, when you were taking my class. I'm sure you watch them on ×2 speed, right? So that's what you're going to want to do as you're going through and, basically doing this. You're going to get a lot of information about these different firms as you watch the videos, right? Really, really important to kind of take the time to go through and watch these different videos just so you can learn a little bit more about those accounting firms. Okay, so does that kind of make sense?
It does, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So again, we're going to basically find this over here in this particular module, which are basically recordings and firm PowerPoints right over here. So that's basically going to be in this module. I do not have office hours over the summer, but I do have office hours in fall. Probably going to be taking place again on Tuesdays from like 9 to 1. So if you want to see me during the semester, you're more than welcome to do it. Now, one of the other things I also have created is basically an artificial intelligence application, right? So this is not something that's going to be evil and it's going to devour the world. Rather, what it's meant to do is to help you with recruiting. So for example, if I come over here and I've had actually the recruiters that I've interviewed have like looked at this and they were kind of freaking out. But part of the reason why they were freaking out is when I built this application, I was using a lot of the video interviews I had recorded over the past 3 years. So that's what's kind of feeding into this AI. So ask an interview question, Mandeep. Like, just give me a question to ask.
What's like the culture of the company that you guys
Which firm?
work at?
Which
BDO.
firm? So what is the company, the culture of BDO? So let's see what it says. There you go. Wow. So you have like kind of over here is a lot more information about BDO. Now, Mandeep, when you are looking at going into public accounting, do you want to be on the audit side or do you want to be on the tax side?
I would say audit.
Okay. Right. So if you are looking at terms of going into audit, right, there's a lot of different resources that I'll get into momentarily. But so have you gone through any interviews so far with any of the firms?
I did one with Conrad.
Okay. And how did that, obvious, I know Matt Conrad, but like what kind of, like, did they ask you behavioral questions, or what kind of questions did they ask you?
Right. They asked me of like times where I had opinions other than my other colleagues, and how did we kind of work past it and to achieve the same goal.
So great. So, and to help you with that, right? So what are, we call those like behavioral questions. So let's see what it says. So like, what are some behavioral questions? So like right over here, describe a situation where you had to work as part of a team. Give an example of a challenging problem. Where did you make a mistake? Difficult client or colleague. Example of a goal you set and how you achieved it. And we could say, yes. Can you provide more detail about the time you made a mistake at work? So you can look at this where it says STAR, right? Which is situation, task, action, result, right? So you can use this as a way of helping yourself kind of guide you through those kind of questions, right? And I think, like, remember too, when you look at these, when you look at the different interviews I have with these different recruiters, what you need to kind of understand is that you're hearing it from the recruiter's perspective, right? They're not necessarily going to be knowing what goes on at the actual firm, because a lot of the recruiters are in HR. Now, you may get the occasional recruiter like PwC. The recruiter for PwC is a former CPA in tax. So she has an incredibly unique perspective in terms of how to go through and recruit. So again, when you hear from the recruiters, but obviously the recruiters are really there to, they're taking the direction kind of from the partners in terms of who they're hiring. And oftentimes recruiters are really trying to see, okay, can I see Mandeep at our firm and being an integral player, and does he have like the material to basically make it up to senior associate? So a lot of times that's what I've heard from some recruiters, how they kind of look at it. So that's like an AI app basically for recruiters. And then over here is something you've already done, is basically, listing out all your different courses. And then over here, you've got the sample resume. Now, what I've also have done is, over time, I have gone through and I wrote articles. Believe it or not, I've actually written articles. And I've also kind of done things like over here, like Jumpstart Your Accounting Career ebook, right? So this is something I made when it was before UWorld CPA Review. It was Roger CPA Review. And so this is kind of talking about, how do firms go through and recruit? What are they going through and looking for? Right. So it's a very easy read. So this is definitely something you want to kind of take a look at. What I also have over here is basically secrets to career success. This is again something that, Roger CPA Review did, and it's like basically, how do you get through these, how to conquer, meet the firms, all these different things. And Mandeep, what I would tell you is that, like, look, I interviewed in January of 1990, right? Not 1890 like Yellowstone. Right? I'm not like a Yellowstone prequel, right? But I interviewed in January 1990, and I got an internship for the summer of 1990, right? So it was literally a 6-month time frame. Now that process at some of the big four, at least in Irvine, is that you interview in summer 25 for summer 27. And we'll talk about why that may pose a particular issue for yourself just in a moment. But again, and that may want to change like how you're basically setting up things with your graduation dates or whatever it may be. but a lot of the firms are already actively filling up summer 2026. And Irvine is a very, very popular place to work. So there's a lot of articles here to kind of go through and help you basically with this. So any questions on this part over here? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I wanted to know what do you mean by TikTok gone viral for giving career advice at the link right there?
I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah.
We'll see what this one is. I think Tom Bradshaw may have sent me this. Yeah, so right now, there's a lot of articles and other things that are out there. And what you're seeing happening is that basically Gen Z, and I never like grouping people into different, groups, but one of the big issues with Gen Z is showing up late to work, right? Not having taken Microsoft Excel or having them really prepared basically for work. There's a lot of different challenges that, like when you're going through to interviewing, it's really can be difficult. Now the good thing is, right, you are talking to me right now and not in December 2026 when you've already graduated.
Right.
If you wait until post-graduation, you're not going to like what happens, because like literally it's like it's not going to be good, and it's much harder to find work once you've left school as opposed to when you're in school. The other thing I will also tell you is that as a, recruiting always seems to go in waves. And back in 2022, I was having a conversation with one of the recruiters I've actually done an interview with for on my channel. And we both kind of talked to each other, and we both kind of said, my God, I've never seen anything like this, meaning that the job market was so hot. It was unreal. It's literally the opposite has happened. If you look at just the number of students that have been reaching out to me for assistance, right, with their mapping, and this is really why I'm here. I want to help my students. When you look at this, it just tells me that there are so many people trying to get jobs in accounting. And why is that? Consulting seems to have dried up. Investment banking, you have to come from a very exclusive school. Financial planning and analysis, also extremely challenging. And so a lot of people are choosing to go the CPA route. A few years ago, I never had that many of my students who went to the University of Southern California, which is a very expensive school, go into accounting. Now, the majority of my students who are at that school are choosing to go into accounting, mainly because there's nothing else out there. So you're seeing a lot more competition, and hence why I kind of gave you that example of when I interviewed in January of 1990, it was for summer 90. Now at one of the big accounting firms, Big Four, you're interviewing in August of this year for summer 27. That's insane. And it's also too, you have to remember the Irvine offices, everybody wants to work in Irvine. Right? It's one of those things where Irvine is like, yeah, do you want to work in Irvine or do you want to work in downtown LA? Oh, really? That's a big surprise. No, I don't know. Let's think about that.
Tough decision.
That's a tough choice, right? Really? Okay.
Right.
Yeah, whatever you want to, I guess if we're in downtown LA, we can go on mass mobs and, go on graffiti subway cars without consequence, right? Oh, no, I'm just kidding. We don't want to do that. We don't want, that's if we go to law school, not if we're going the CPA route. Okay.
Right.
So coming back over here. So again, you can find a lot of the stuff like professional decorum. Again, this is our article from Jennifer Hannigan. She's a recruiter I've known for a long time. And this is just really to kind of give you more context about different ways to kind of go through and handle yourself during the interview process, right? By the way, if you do Zoom, you can kind of see how bad my office is in the background. You probably want to have like a better background, like maybe like an efficient like bookcase or one of those other kinds of things rather than doing the blur out, but definitely try to avoid having like cats jump in and like Zoom bombing you. That's like what I love on my videos, but it may not be appropriate for, the basically a job type of interview. So all of these things are here to kind of help you. Then over here, I have a lot of information about the different scholarships that are available to students. Now, one of the things I'm going to say is I generally do not recommend a master's degree in accounting for a variety of reasons, right? One of them is more than likely under the new regulations, the degree it's going to be you need a bachelor's degree and then 2 years of work experience to become licensed. They're going to get rid of the 150 or they're going to modify it. But if for some reason, Mandeep, you could not find work, what I would recommend doing is I would go to UCI or I would probably go to UCI because you're at Fullerton now, but I would go to UCI and Deloitte has, I think, 10 scholarships that they fund every year, academic scholarships, so that if you applied to UCI for their master's of professional accountancy, you can go there for free, except you'd have to pay for books and parking and living expenses, but the academic portion would be covered, right? Also,
Right.
there are RSM scholarships, accounting, Financial Women's Alliance, Cal CPA. There's a lot of great scholarships that are out there and the information can be found over here. This is more about meeting the work experience requirement, which is obviously going to be changing pretty soon. I have posted up here at Irvine Valley, we have like a lot of different career kind of calendar types of things. So this is something that you can kind of go through and look up as well. And then over here, let's see here. Surveys, PwC information, EY information, part and full-time job opportunities, getting the most out of your accounting education. These are just different articles I've written, different guides, how to transfer successfully, clearing course prerequisites. And then these are just articles about our amazing IBC accounting program that you can kind of see what a lot of our former students have done. And then again, all these different other parts over here. So that's kind of like where I would be, kind of looking at. Now, Mandeep, specifically for yourself, I'm going to take your Google Sheet and I'm going to basically add in here a tab. And I want you to I'm going to kind of create a timeline here for you in terms of where you are, right? So we've got summer 2020. By the way, aside from 301B, what else are you taking right now?
Just 301B.
Okay. So, and if you take in accounting 112.1 and accounting, okay, perfect. I would also suggest taking accounting 112.3 at IBC. You could also take accounting 52. And even though you may not ultimately need the units, the reason why I would be taking those classes is really because, you're basically, you want to get yourself more familiar with the various different technologies, right?
Right.
So if I kind of come over here and I look at this from a rolling perspective. So let's go here. Okay. So here we've got fall 2025. Now, what you want to be hoping to do is in fall of 2025, you want to be aiming for the summer 26. So this should be spring 26. You want to be aiming for an internship in summer 2026, right? Because if you're tentatively going to be graduating in fall 26, right? You need to be spending right now proactively positioning yourself for a summer 26 internship right now.
Right.
How would I suggest doing that? You probably want to start here. And obviously, Haskell and White, our contact there is now actually changed, but you want to kind of start over here. You want to watch the videos. And what you also have to kind of remember is that, because of the demand by students to get into accounting jobs, this may no longer be realistic, right? I hope that's not the case. but it may be something where all of these have filled. I know for the big four, most of these have filled, right?
Right.
So what you may want to be aiming to do is looking at spring 26 intern, right? Meaning a working internship during the spring of 2026, right?
Okay.
Or fall 26 is going to be a little bit tougher to do, but spring 26 during busy season, this may be more realistic, right?
Right.
Where do you live in Orange County? Like just you can tell me the city. Where do you like what city?
Lake Forest.
Okay.
Lake Forest.
Right. So when you're at Lake Forest and obviously, getting to jobs in Irvine, you're obviously going to have transportation to kind of go through and do that. But this might be the way to go if this can't go through. Now,
Right.
here's the part I also want you to kind of think about. Do you have any friends or family members that live in San Jose?
No.
Do you have any friends or family member that are outside of California?
No.
Okay. Do you have any friends or family members that work for either corporations that are publicly traded or larger companies, or that work at accounting firms or law firms?
Not accounting. No.
But what kind of firms do they work for?
My uncle used to work for like a research company.
Okay. So here's what you need to do, right? In addition to watching these videos about how to recruit, right? In addition to doing your research about these different firms, I'm going to show you some other tools momentarily. You need to start talking to your family members, right?
Okay.
You have to be going all out every time. Like my wife, like my son right now in his first year of school. My wife loves it when I am, she says, Bennett, you're doing all this recruiting for your students. You need to help out your child. It's like, okay, right, no problem, honey. And my CEO wife, the happy wife, happy life, right? So
Right.
I am always trying to find for my son like different opportunities for the area that he wants to go into, right? So always, and so if you talk to your relatives now, right, because you're looking for something a year from now, right? If you say, I need a
Right.
job tomorrow, you're probably not going to get a very good response. But if you say, hey, I'm looking for something for a year from now, then in their mind, they're not going to feel that pressure. And if they hear from somebody, then they may be able to come out and help you, right? So
Right.
you want to talk to every single person you know, right? This is why we have LinkedIn, right? You
Right.
need to be using your different recruiting tools. You want to be recruiting within people with the accounting society, within BAP. By the way, most of the people, did you take a leadership position in accounting society or BAP?
No, I've applied. I had like an
Okay.
interview today, so hopefully for
Yeah.
next semester.
Yeah. Just even if you don't get it, what I would be doing is I would just, can I volunteer for your upcoming Meet the Firms? Right. Because remember, when you go to meet the firms at these events, right? Like, let's not forget, okay, like, let's not forget how absolutely insane these events are, right? And I have the perfect thing to kind of go through and show you. So this is from last fall, right? So everybody, welcome to meet the firms. I got Tim, we got Chloe, and we're like, everybody, welcome to meet the firms. I got Tim, we got Chloe, and we're like, oh my goodness, this is like the biggest meet the firms I think we have ever seen. I think it's more than 600, 900. Is it 1,000? So dude, what I would be doing is like, there's no like, look, when you go to these things, they're absolutely chaotic, right?
Right.
And this is why you want to spend the time here really targeting and refining, right? What your recruiting strategy is going to be. If you're waiting for this, you're absolutely insane. This is like
Right.
these events, you can't even hear people. And at these
Yeah.
events, they're getting bins of resumes, right? They're getting all these
Right.
people. And like, do you like I've had conversations with recruiters after these events, like, dude, Bennett, here's a pile of 100 resumes. Who do you know? It's like, well, former student. Don't know, former student. But I mean, I don't know if they ever
Right.
followed up with that stuff, but you
Right.
have to do your recruiting. You do not want to do it during this, which is why, even if you don't get into a position for BAP, I would say, hey, even though you didn't elect me that or select me for a position, that's okay. Can I volunteer to assist you during Meet the Firms? And by the way, when you
Right.
are assisting at Meet the Firms, you will sometimes get earlier access to go through and talk to the different Meet the Firm members. And it's like you don't want to be in like that totally crazy, like in those rooms where it's boiling hot, right? They usually don't have the AC up to the right level. It's absolute madness, right? I couldn't go to
Right.
spring, so I was kind of bummed out, but I did see a really good volleyball game between, I think, UCLA and Long Beach with my son. So that time is never coming back, and Monet Nikolov is not coming back either, right? So, but this is again like that's what you want to kind of be doing, right? So you really want to right now, like talk to all of your family members and just say, hey man, what can I go through and do to, get this, to get these jobs or whatever may have you. Now, the other thing I will also show you, and I posted this up in the announcements like a few weeks back. Okay, so this is an article that kind of shows, this kind of goes to my point of like 75% of graduating college students have yet to secure a job. We're in bad times right now, right? It's
Right.
very, very difficult to find work. So what that means is that while you are in school, you have to be even more proactive about recruiting, right? So you're doing the right thing by talking to me right now. I would also tell you too, is that you're probably going for a big four accounting firm unless you know someone or unless you have some other kind of there's no way you're going to be
Right.
able to go big four because
Right.
that recruiting starts so much earlier, right? So, and again, by the way, Mandeep, don't believe a word I'm saying, right? And what I mean by that, no, dude, like I'm half attorney, right? I'm going to lie to people, right? It's my nature.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding. No, but what I'm saying though is you have to realize something that don't believe me, don't believe anybody, believe in yourself, do your own research, right? In
Right.
terms of figuring out things. So the other tool I'm going to kind of show you, and one of the most important things you can do prior to, being basically going, especially if you're going to be doing auditing, is that, have you heard of the PCAOB?
No.
Okay. The PCAOB is the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. They're the ones who regulate all the auditors for publicly traded companies, right? So when you look at this, and all of these firms basically have to, if you're an auditor and you audit publicly traded companies, you have to be registered here. Now, Conrad LLP, you're not going to find them on there. Why is that? Because they don't audit publicly traded companies, right? I think HCBT also does not audit publicly traded companies. They do more privately held, do a lot of tax work. Anderson Tax, they don't audit publicly traded companies, but BDO. So if you see this over here, what you're going to find is, BDO, USA, I can basically find out, right, by going through and looking at this, is that, well, BDO signs off on a lot of different audit reports, right, as an auditor. And what I can then kind of find is that, okay, let's see this over here, Newegg Technologies or Newegg Commerce, right? So right over here, and let's take a look at this a little bit more carefully. So Newegg, I'm pretty sure is out of, I think they're out of Orange County. And if I did a search on him, so if I say Christopher Farthing, so he's an assurance policy partner at BDO USA. So if I say over here, and what we're trying to find here is like what office is he out of? So he's out of Las Vegas. So right, that wouldn't really be applicable to you because he's not in Orange County. But if I'm trying to kind of go through and like look at basically as auditors, right? So if you're looking at BDO and you want to be a part of their audit practice, it would probably behoove you to kind of go through and do some research, right? So I'm going to add this to this little page here, right? And then the other thing I would also ask you is, have you spent time with the filings of US publicly traded companies? Have you looked at US publicly traded companies at all?
I have not, no.
Okay. So I want you to go to sec.gov, right? And this is something that, I really try to have for my honors courses at IBC. I really try to do, and I try to do this in my videos. But do you work right now for Rouse, or you used to work for them?
I do work for them.
Okay. And they're owned by Kroger, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Kroger company is publicly traded, right? So coming right over here, I can learn more about the place where I go through and work, right? So being a publicly traded company, and this is something you should have been learning in intermediate accounting, right? If I look at their financial statements, the auditors of Kroger are PwC, and it's based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. You may not want to live in Cincinnati, Ohio. I went to a Reds game there once. It was really, really hot. So just got to keep that in mind, right? But the reason why, you look at these publicly traded filings is if you're working as an auditor for BDO, for PwC, for any of these firms, you're going to be getting financial statements from, these companies. And these companies are going to be providing you their financial statements. When they provide you the financial statements, it's going to be up to you to kind of go through and perform procedures to audit the numbers. The more familiarity you have with the audited financial statements, the reviewed financial statements, the press releases, the proxy statements, all those types of things, the more familiarity you have with that, the stronger you're going to come off during interviews. And so as we look at right over here, Kroger has got, obviously they've got about 15 billion worth of assets. They got about 15 billion of liabilities. So this is a company that's clearly, they're pretty, they've only got about 8 billion of equity. But if you look at this, they're kind of swallowing themselves by buying back a lot of their own shares. So they've literally bought back, wow. They've bought back almost 2/3 of their total outstanding shares, which is pretty nuts. So again, looking at publicly traded companies, I think will actually very much, basically help you when you're interviewing for jobs, right? So that's something I would definitely encourage you to do, is the more time you can spend with public filings, the better off you're going to be. So what else can I answer for you?
I wanted to know, so when I go on LinkedIn, right, to find, or on Handshake to find a job opening or an internship, most of them I've already applied to but never heard back.
Okay,
So I
yeah,
don't know
you're not, yeah, you're not, okay, so here's the thing. You're not being ghosted. Okay, you're not, it's not like Pac-Man. You probably wouldn't know what Pac-Man is, like the
I
ghost.
do.
Okay, you do know? Okay, so I'm not
Yeah,
that, right? I'm
yeah, I
not
do.
much of a, yeah. I am an old man, but I still may have some references in me left. Okay, so when you go through and apply for a job, if you do not have an introduction, right? And basically it really comes down to when you're going through and applying for work, right? You want to kind of make sure, let me see if I can, I'm just going to pause real quick. So when you're applying for work, right, the worst thing you can do is just to send out resumes blindly. The worst thing you can do at Meet the Firms is to drop off your resume at a table, right? You have to establish a personal connection with the company or the person you're trying to interview with, right? What I will tell you again is, going back to your uncle who's a researcher for a company, if he takes your resume and presents it to the hiring manager, whoever it is, that's going to go significantly much more of a longer way than putting something on LinkedIn, because there are so many people right now. There's like AI bots, there's all kinds of crazy things that are going on with those job applications.
Right.
So unless you, and also too, there's also like a lot of fake job postings. They might just be collecting resumes. But
Right.
what you want to try to do is to have your resume personally presented to a recruiter, to someone. And, that I would say, and that's really why I'm glad that you're going to like going to the speaker events, right, at Cal State Fullerton. Because if you've connected with someone, by the way, I would never hand them the resume there. I would say, hey, can I get your contact information? Then I would kind of say, hey, like, let's try to, and you're doing the right thing by not talking about accounting, just by talking about other personal things. And what I would then kind of do is to use that to kind of start a conversation, and then give your resume. And it's like, look, if you've applied for something you didn't hear back, do not take personal offense to it. But again, you need to have the resume presented. Okay. And it's like, I can't tell you how important that is. I actually had a student who and this is really, really rare, by the way, and this is a few years back, and I presented her to an accounting firm. But when she interviewed, she was incredibly quiet. She really wasn't talking. And I talked to the partner, and this is, again, I never get feedback from, nor should I, from an employer, right? They won't talk to me. I just refer them a student, and they make their own decisions. But I knew this partner, and I said, hey man, what happened? He's all, dude, she was like really quiet. I go, okay, let me, like, will you talk to her again? He's all, sure. So I talked to my student, and my God, he couldn't make her stop talking. And she's now been at that firm, I think, for 4 or 5 years. She's a CPA. They love her. So you have to realize it's like that personal ability to take your resume and present that to a firm is absolutely critical. And that goes back to why community involvement. Did you play any sports growing up in Orange County?
I did. I was on my school's track and field team.
Track and field. Okay. Did you get a
Yeah.
did you go to any like club events, or did you go to any kind of like events outside of the school track and field?
No, just everything was related to track and field.
Okay. What other things were you involved with while you were there, while you were in high school?
I mean, just sports in general,
What other sports did you play?
football and soccer.
Were you actually on the football team, or are you just kind of playing for fun?
I was just playing for fun.
Okay. So here's what I would be doing, right? If you got to meet players or parents from track and field, and if you have friends from high school, and if they have different types of connections, that's what you need to be doing. You literally want to be utilizing your existing resource base as much as you possibly can. And even if that turns up to be a dead end, that's okay, right? You just really, really try to go through and use that as much as you possibly can.
Right.
So, and it's
So
just, this process takes a long time. I really just hope, though, that if after me posting this video, and the reason why I thank you, Mandeep, for allowing me to record this, but it's really to help out other students that are going through this, which is, you have to be constantly recruiting. It's probably more important than, well, I don't want to say it's more important than your intermediate 2 class that you're taking right now at Fullerton, because obviously that class is going to help you prepare for the FAR portion of the CPA exam. But if you've passed the exam and you have no job, that's not good, right?
right.
So, but yeah, that's what I would try to unlock every kind of like, look under every stone, look everywhere to try to find those different connections.
Right. So, like, let's say you found like a job, right? Before applying, what would you do so your application isn't just one in a bunch? Like, how would you kind of go on and have that like personal
First thing I would,
connection?
first thing I would do is I would see, who am I connected to through that
Yeah.
company. Do I have any second, if I have a first degree connection, that's boom, that's amazing. If it's more than one removed, then that's going to be like a little bit tougher, right? And that's really where, again, I would really, so if you went to a company and you said, hey, Bennett, I see that you're someone in your, by the way, are you part of my Tchaikovsky accounting alumni group on LinkedIn?
I'm not, no.
Okay, look at your invitations. I think I may have sent you, hold on. So if you suffered with me through one of my classes, right, I have a group called Tchaikovsky Accounting Alumni. And in that group, I basically will post different things I hear about or see about. I also post those generally on IBC 30 to CPA. But what I would be doing is, again, you need to basically try to figure out a way to have your resume presented to the hiring manager. That's really what you want to be doing. Now, when you're going through as well and interviewing, right? And when you're meeting people, right now it's like a little bit late in the afternoon, you're feeling kind of chill, right? You're just chilling out right now, right? But when you interview, it's really important that you are, hey, how are we doing today? What's going on? Because when you're being hired, right, you can have a 4.0, but if you spent your entire time working in the library or living in the library while you're in school, no activities, nothing, like, yeah, that's just not going to be good. That's not what employers are looking for, right? The droids the employers are looking for are going to be, I'm just kidding. You're not a droid. We're not C3PO or R2D2. You know that reference, right?
The Star Wars.
Thank you. Okay, good. Episode 4, 5, and 6. Well, first half of 6, but there we go. But when you're going through and doing those interviews, it's like that's really what they're doing. And one of my students said, Bennett, you said to be up, right? When you're on like a game show or whatever else. And you have to remember too, is your first interview may be on Zoom, right? So how are you presenting yourself? And it's like really when you're going into the workplace, what I would really tell you is like, one, be on time, be 15 minutes early to the interview, be ready to go. When you're starting your full-time job, be prepared to go to work, like no hangovers, like I thought that's going to be you. Be prepared to go through and go to work, right? Keep your phone away, like do not be on your phone all day. Use your work computer for work. Assume that you're constantly being tracked. The firm that you go to, everywhere you go to, they're going to be, how would I put this? They're going to train you on whatever they need you to do. You're going to go into tax, you're going to go into audit or whatever else you might be going into. But that's how I would kind of approach, like, when you're interviewing, trying to get your resume personally presented and all these interview tips and things. And also make sure I'm not doing a good job with you right now because you're asking me a question. I'm like diverging, right? But I'm trying to give like more background in terms of my answer. But when you're interviewing, make sure you are answering the question that is being asked, right? Other thing on interviewing, if you don't know the answer, do not make stuff up. Don't use AI, don't make stuff up. The reason for that is what accounting firms, their greatest fear is that you're going to give wrong information to a client. That's the biggest the biggest fear of any accounting firm.
Right.
So
they want to ask, so like how you mentioned like most of the jobs available or like internships available in like Irvine are like filled for like summer 2026. So let's
but
say
again, what I'm telling you right now is that the job market for students there's so many more people in accounting. There are so many more people that are going into accounting. And this is why it's, and I think for summer 25 going into summer, that's really a lot more for Big Four. But I will tell you though, is that if you look at those videos that I pointed out, you can reach out, you can say, hey, Bennett, can you, as a former student of mine, I'm happy to do this. Because you took accounting 1B with me, correct? Or did you take 1A with me?
I took both.
Okay, you took 1A and 1B. Wow, here's my memory because you took them online, right? It's terrible. But what I would do though is by the way, do you feel as though you have a good base for 301A and 301?
I would say so.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm not paying you to say that or anything like that, so it's good. So like, look, if you said to me, hey, Bennett, can you introduce me to the recruiter at BDO? I would absolutely do that. And you would send me over your resume, and I would basically show it to the recruiter, send you an email to the recruiter. This is someone who's interested in either summer 26 or spring of 26 for an internship, an audit.
Right,
And if she says, well, I only have tax, then that might be something, okay, let's go try the next one, right? Go to
right,
HCT, go to another firm. So that's really it's really like, but you need to watch those videos prior to making that decision, because when you meet with the recruiter, you're going to want to spend time on their website. What are their values? Who are their people? Where did the audit partners go to school?
right. So I did want to ask also, so like let's say there's like a job opening at like San Jose area, right?
Mhm.
Or out of state. Would it be encouraging to apply to those places, or should you try to stay like in
So
southern Orange County?
here's what I'm going to tell you, right? So one of the hold on, just give me 1 second. So you're living with mom and dad right now, right?
Right.
And you're saving yourself a lot of money,
Yes.
because if you were to get a 1 bedroom in Irvine, right, dude, it's gonna be expensive,
Couple of grand.
a couple grand, and that's
Yeah.
after tax dollars. That's not
Right.
pre-tax dollars, right? So if you, and why I asked you if you knew someone in San Jose is that, well, if I can crash out at somebody's house and they live close to the accounting firms. I mean, you have to remember, like, owning a car insurance on that vehicle. Because if you're an auditor, it's not like tax where you're in the office all the time. And when you're an auditor, you're going to be going out to client sites, although that's happening a little bit less and less now. But you're going to need to be mobile. You're going to be able to drive around places, right? And what's really important with that is, you know, as an auditor, right, that's in having a car is very expensive. It's not cheap.
Right.
So what I would tell you is, and like also too, like if you show, well, I've got like a 16-year-old Lexus, which is like a total like hoopty, like the L is missing, so it just says Exus, right? So it's like, really, Bennett, like what kind of fake car are you driving right now, right?
It's an
I gotta
import.
glue that back on. But you go through, and like I'm like driving these, I feel like my house is like Cuba, right? It's like I've got like some like 56 Ford that's like running, right, pre-Castro, that I'm like keeping up like forever, right? Because the vehicle prices are so out of control. But when you look at that and kind of say like, okay, the cost of living in California is so high, right? It's
Right.
really expensive. So, at your age, you also need to be exploring, like, you're younger, you're in college right now. I mean, you're not like some like 50-year-old dude. Like, it was like kind of like, okay, Benny, you got a few more years before you put you out to pasture. But you're there, and like this is the start of your career. Now, to me, being by family is extremely important, especially when you have kids, because having mom and dad there really, really important for the living, and
Right.
for helping to raise those kids. And you know, uh, that's really what's tough, is like to say, like, do I restart in Nevada? Do I restart in, Washington State? Do I restart in, you know, Florida? Do I restart in Texas? Do I restart in Arizona? Where like, and that's really the biggest problem California has, is that as a lot of these businesses move out of California, and especially places like Irvine, where it's just so expensive to be,
Right.
then the accounting firms are going to have like less companies to audit. So you have to kind of think about, like, for your long-term like thought process is like, if this business environment in California continues to be as toxic as it is to business relative to other places, you have to really kind of be, by the way, this is my own opinion, it's not my school district or anybody else's, but just look at the numbers, right? Look at how many businesses have been leaving California. It's a lot of businesses. And that's really what you have to kind of think about as you're, starting out on your career. because it's easier to move and to kind of set those roots and everything else when you're younger as opposed to when you're older.
Right.
But we have like the best weather in the world, which is great, but
It's hard to beat.
it's hard to beat.
Right.
By the way, if you can, I would take, when you're at Fullerton, as soon as possible, I would try to take accounting 404 with Professor April Morris. Take
Oh,
cost accounting or take 404 with April Morris. If you do great, tell her you have me for accounting 1B. If things
okay.
don't go well, I don't know who Tchaikovsky is. I don't know, right? But April will tear me a new one. But, that's really something though that for you is something to really kind of think about.
Right.
Because by the way,
So,
too, like when you're out there doing great work at BDO and you're going to clients and showing them like providing great service for those clients, that's how you're going to get your next opportunities. It's
right.
by doing great work.
So is it encouraging to apply to those internships that are like far away or even like
You
at another
have to
state?
you have to make sure if you go to San Jose, you think Irvine cost of living is crazy. It's nothing compared. San Jose is very, very expensive.
Right.
And that's what I would be concerned about. I would not apply to some place. It's kind of like going like when I have students that say, oh, I got into UCSB, UC San Diego, and Berkeley. I go, well,
Right.
which those have you visited? And then they tell me none of them. I'm gonna go with the ranking of the school. That's the worst possible mistake you can make. Right.
Right.
You have to kind of go to that office, see if it's the right people, is it the right opportunity? Because like, look, when you're working in all these interviews that you're going to be doing in big four firms, right? Or sorry, with when you go through the recruiting cycle this fall for your summer 26 internship, the one thing you're trying to figure out is where am I going to be a fit with the people at this firm?
Right.
Where am I going to be the best fit with this firm? Like, where am I going to be? Where is it that I'm going to have like the most amount of success, right? Because
Right.
it's like if you go and work in an accounting firm that is really, really toxic and you don't like the people there, it's even if it has a great name, you're going to be absolutely miserable,
Right.
right? Because if you're working in a place where, and by the way, like accountants, I really blew it when I was in public accounting. Like that's why I wrote so many of these articles because I failed. I was in and out of accounting after 2 years, but that was more because of me, not, I mean, I had like, you can learn more from me than I think just because of my failures. And, you just want to go to the firm, put on a consultant's mindset. You go in there, you do a great job, you get
Right.
prepared. Like if you're auditing a client, what always surprises me is how many students that don't go to sec.gov and do the research on the clients and their competitors before walking in there. And if I look at Kroger, and I mean, we all know Kroger's competitors, right? We know it's like, oh, like Albertsons, Whole Foods, all that other kind of stuff. But
Right.
it's like this is why it's so important because like if you go out to the client, like how are you going to be providing more value as an
Right.
associate, right? How are you going to be? And a lot of the time too is just going to be going through and kind of doing like that extra research, but making sure you've taken a ton of Microsoft Excel. Can you do Alteryx? Can you do, you know, all those kinds of things?
Right. And so I wanted to ask, so like most of the firms will have openings for like summer internships, but there will be some where they have like a winter
Yep.
or a spring.
Mhm.
Where would you find those internships at?
They mainly should be posted on their websites, but a lot of times too, it all also can depend upon what your relationships are with the particular recruiters. Um,
Okay.
that's really why I would kind of like, again, I think when I did those interviews, a lot of times I know Conrad, they have like rolling things. And one of the challenges is right now for Conrad, obviously with I don't know, I'm sure they're going to be fine because they do great work. but it's like with all the government, you know, because they audit government, they audit government contracts. So it's like every business has its own kind of seasonality, but most of the firms should have like those postings on their website. Now, what's interesting is I spoke with one of my former students who was at an accounting firm. And what was really interesting is that we were talking, and I know the partner at this firm, and I sent two students over. One of the students is still there. This is a different one than the one before, but the other
Right.
one did not work out, right? So it's okay. I'm like, by the way, the recruiters love me because this is how much I charge them. I don't charge the recruiters anything for what I do of helping, like I don't charge students or recruiters. But one of the things though that, you know, was really interesting is I asked her, well, do you have any, like, how are you guys filling your opening? She said, Bennett, believe it or not, it's all been word of mouth. I go, what do you mean by that? So, well, we do recruit at these different Meet the Firms events, but the way we're getting most of our personnel is basically through friends of friends. And so those are kinds of things like if you saw an opening, why is it so important to basically have someone present you? It's basically because of, well, if you walk into a situation like that, that can really be a huge thing. And again, that goes down to the company culture. And there'll be
Right.
some cultures you'll do really well at, other ones you won't. Great example for me in Cal State Fullerton, right? I'm not a PhD, I'm a JD.
Right.
I have tenure at Irvine Valley. I absolutely love my job. But when I was teaching part-time at Cal State Fullerton, it wasn't the right place for me. The pay was significantly less, right, than what I make it at IBC. But it was also things too, like the department said, okay, you have to come in, you have to curve the class to a 2.3 or 2.6. And I'm like going, really? Like, if you look at the GPA of the students in my class, I'm very fortunate because of how I have the Russian disinformation campaign to tweet rate my professors. I'm just kidding around about that. But my class typically has a GPA of about a 3.5 or higher. And when I was teaching 301A for Fullerton, it had a really high GPA. Now I was able to fall within that, but my personal philosophy is when it comes to teaching intermediate or financial or whatever else, is that you as a student should get the grade you earn, right? And
Right.
my job as a professor is to say that, well, when you took accounting 1A and 1B with me, the exams were in person. You had to show up on Saturdays to take the tests, and you had to perform well on those exams to get your grade that you got in the class,
Right.
right? And so me teaching at Fullerton, and the other problem for me to teach at Fullerton is because I don't have a PhD, they're never going to give me a full professor type thing, right? So for
Right.
me, teaching at Cal State Fullerton, I love the students who are at Fullerton, but for me as a faculty member, that's not the right place for me to go through and teach, right? I was also offered full-time at one point, full-time at another private university. But when I was looking through the medical benefits compared to what I have right now, and I showed them to the dean that had offered me the position, she said, wow, Ben, and I want to get a job at IBC, right? So I was like, hey, man, it's like, I'm really, really happy where I work. But the reason why I'm bringing that
Right.
up is that because when you go work for different firms, when you start out, you'll be like an associate for a year or two. Then you'll become a senior associate, meaning that you're then basically taking direction from the managers. Then you're basically mentoring and supervising staff. And that's how you kind of grow within these different organizations.
Right. So let's say like since I don't have like an internship right now, what could I do to prepare myself for like the recruiting season in fall, let's
It
say?
is exactly what I've been showing you. I would spend, if you spent 35, let's call it, if you watch it on times 1.5 speed, if you spend 25 hours watching all of those recruiting videos, right? And
Right.
I'm being dead serious. You start with the ones from spring and you work backwards. You watch the recruiting videos. You know, that would be the first thing I would do. Second thing I would do, make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date. You don't have any crazy social media out there. right? Again, if you're putting something up there that you're, say, for example, you're pro whatever cause that's going on today, right? You want to be as apolitical as possible because you don't
Okay.
want to have a social media profile that someone's going to be looking at and saying, wait a second, are you some radicalized person coming into my accounting firm? Because really, I'm hiring you to do great work for me and to do great work for
Right.
my clients. And if you have some sort of a personal belief that's going to be offensive to my clients, then that
Right.
might be a problem, right?
Right. Right.
So I would be looking at this from the perspective of, right, looking at all those interview videos, right? First thing I would do, then I would be looking at, once you identify those and say, Bennett, can you introduce me to some of these people? And again, like Mandeep, because you took me for 1A and 1B, even though it was online, it was in-person testing. So I definitely, for my students, I have no problem doing that, for you. Obviously, I can set the table and have you talk to the campus recruiter, but you're going to have to be the one who takes it from there and basically turns it into something else.
Right.
That's really what's important. And I would also tell you too, practice, right? Practice your interviewing questions. Like go to that AI app and say, can you give me a list of interview questions to prepare from? I'll give you another example here too. Let's see. So basically, if we go back to the modules, right, and you kind of, and I think I skipped this one over here, but let's find this here. Okay, interview questions and preparing for interviews, right? So right over here, these are sample interview questions, right, that you can kind of go through and do. Why do you want to work for audit, tax, or advisory? Why do you want to work for that in that area? Is you have no accounting background, what made you want to work for an audit firm or CPA career wise? Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? What's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness? Here are some more videos, behavioral interview questions. And then over here, you've got like interviews with accounting firms, part 1, accounting firm due diligence, right? So if I come over here, I watch this video.
For the public. If things were like thrown around.
So these, again, like there's so many, and I'm glad we're doing this, right? Because
Right.
there are there's so many rabbit holes you can basically jump into and all these different things, but this is really what I made these videos for a reason. It's just because of in this group, I think we're now over 650 students, right? There's no way realistically, I mean, I would love to have like myself duplicated 10 times so I could have these kind of conversations with every one of my students, but there's just no way, right? With my time and everything else. But what can I do is I created, all of these resources here, to help you with going through this process. And when you go and do your interview, that's when you have to go through and do your research, right? So if I typed in BDO USA LLP, and now I'm going to go here and kind of see like, well, where if I want to kind of go through and look at this, and if I want to try to find the offices. Yeah, I mean, I might want to kind of, look, locations, perfect. Okay, so I want to say California. Okay, so you got over here BDO Orange County. See what it says. Okay, so over here. talk to a professional there. Over here, their core different technologies, community engagement. Here's our different, now here's something you would want to do, right? Oh, they're involved with junior achievement. They're involved with the Harvest Food Bank. They're involved with, this is all goes to how are they giving back to the community? Now, you don't have to be someone who's giving back to the community, but obviously doing things with, you know, basically doing things in Orange County is really important. So right over here, if I went to, like, say, Anthony Ferguson, let's see if he's PCAOB. And then let's go over here to auditors. Okay, so for investors, I'm going to do an auditor search. Okay, right here, engagement partner, Anthony Andrew Ferguson, right? BDO USA, this has got to be him. Okay, so these are the different ones he's been involved with, right? So if we come over here to CleanSpark, right? So if I now do a search on CleanSpark, okay, right over here, and I look at their quarterly report. If I go over here, I can learn more about this particular company, right? So, right, I might want to look at not at the 10Q, which is a quarterly report. I probably want to look at the 10K, which is their annual report, which is going to contain more information, right? But they've got a Nevada, they're basically in Nevada. And so this is something where I could now kind of go through and learn about this company. So they are a Bitcoin mining company, right? So Anthony Ferguson, as he is the audit partner for this particular engagement, right? And it's being signed by BDO USA, you know, they've been their auditors since 2024, right? So right over here, even though this says Vegas, you know, the audit partner is clearly based in, you know, he's Orange County, but he's obviously getting business out of Vegas, right? So that could be something like, oh, I saw that you're like the listed audit partner on this we would probably freak out that you knew that, right? But it's something though that if you're kind of like, if I'm looking at his biography, right? And so if we kind of look at this over here, fintech industry finance, obviously is doing Bitcoin, right? So right over here, and if I look at his education, he went to Cal State Northridge, right? Not Cal State Fullerton, but Cal State Northridge, right? Doesn't mean it's anything, you know, great school. And then coming over here, involved with the Boy Scouts, and then Institute of Architecture, board of directors, right? Those are awesome things. If we look here at Kristen McCarthy, she is the managing partner, I believe, for the Orange County office. She went to USC, professional affiliation. So again, in her community involvement, she's involved with CASA, which is a great organization here in Orange County. So again, when you're looking at these different firms and getting information, this is where you have to go through and do your research, right? The more research you do, the more you've shown your interest in those kind of things in a company, the better off you're going to be. Now, you don't want to get Captain Creepy. What do I mean by that? You don't want to look up who their kids are and say, oh, I saw that your child is doing this. Now, you don't want to do that. But what you're trying to do on an interview is that if you can find a way to not talk about accounting, right? You can talk about sports, you can talk about like track and field events. If you found what were you specializing in track and field?
Shot put and discus.
Your best conversation you could have will be a partner a manager, a senior associate who did that exact same thing at the college level.
Right.
That's what you would want to be trying to find, because that's
So
going to give you an immediate connection to them.
So would you be able to find them, like, let's say you, like, for example, BDO, right? So let's say you find someone or like a managing partner or a partner that works at BDO. Would it be best to like reach out to them on LinkedIn
No,
and
you're gonna
try
no,
to
no, no.
talk to them, or
The
how would it
first thing
work?
you're gonna no, the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna talk to the recruiter.
Okay.
Once you talk to the recruiter, and now look, if you had like your uncle, if they know
Right.
someone at BDO, that's different, right? But
Okay.
you don't want to reach out to a professional unless you have an introduction, right? And
Right.
you have to be really careful. You don't want to like, if I like, look, I get students that contact me all the time, right? And they find it, and why is that? Well, here on YouTube, they'll say, dude, I watched your video, man. It was great. And like, okay, thank
Right.
you. But they'll watch like my video and they'll say, oh yeah, can you do your mapping for me? It's like, sure, no problem. I do that all the time. Right. But when you're talking about a professional, you don't want to reach out to them. It's got to be done through a channel. It could be a
Okay.
recruiter, could be your uncle's friend,
Right.
right? It has to be though through more of like a personal type of connection. Right. When I
Right.
looked at that page just now, it reminded me that I had a conversation with Krista McCarthy prior to the pandemic at a recruiting event that I still need to follow up with her on. So
Right.
it'll be nice at one point in time that I can see her. But you have to remember too, like when I go to these recruiting events, I really try to, like, I will go to Cal State Fullerton meet the firms this fall, right? I'll be there.
Right. Right.
But I really try not to talk to the professionals. Why? Because you're talking to them, right? But it is a great time for me to kind of go through and catch up with different individuals that are there.
Right.
But you need to, like, that's where you have to kind of, you start with the recruiter, and then, you don't even dictate who you talk with. The recruiter is going to have you meet with staff accountants. They probably actually, staff accountants would usually take you out to lunch, but you would
Right.
more than likely meet with a partner, a manager, a senior associate. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to see how is Mandeep going to be a fit culturally within our firm. Remember, if you are rude to the assistant who is at the front of BDO and you start saying, oh, get me this thing, get me some water now, dude,
Right.
you're done. Because all of them collectively, like the partner is not going to decide if you're going to be hired or not. It's going to be
Right.
the firm as a whole, right? So this is
Right.
really, that's why when you go to meet the firms, right, it's a group interview, right? That's only one touch point, right? So when you go to meet the firms, that's only one point of time of contact, right?
Right.
So you have like, that's going to be one contact. When you see somebody on an on-campus event, that's another point of contact. And it could also be one of your classmates who's working at BDO, right? That's going to be another point of contact. So you have to kind of remember that if I'm behaving, not on my best behavior all the time, then someone sees me and it's like, okay, like that's why I kind of always assume you're being filmed 24/7. Like
Right.
not like it's like not the Truman Show or the Mandeep Show or the Bennet Show, but it's just like you always want to be true and genuine as to who you
Right.
are. So that's what
Right.
I'm saying.
So let's say, like, how would you go on to get that connection with a recruiter? So let's say you found an
Here's what
opening
you
at
do.
BDO.
You watch the videos. You
Okay.
then say, Bennett, I liked BDO. Why did you like them? Because this is what she said during those pre-meet the firms meetings. And
Hmm.
say, okay, then I'm going to say, Mandeep, meet Reagan. I think it's Reagan. Actually, she'll
Right.
kill me if I get this wrong. Hold on. See, even I'm terrible at sometimes. I'm almost positive it's Reagan, but just give me 1 second. Yes, it is. It's Reagan, right? So Reagan, please don't be mad at me for saying this, but it's Reagan Hicks. So you'd say, hey, Bennett, can you introduce me to Reagan? Okay, so I would
Right.
say, Reagan, this is Mandeep. Mandeep is going to be graduating. This is why it's so important that on your resume, you clearly state, hey, I'm looking for spring 26 or summer 26 audit, right?
Right.
And then you say that, yeah, and then, that I would say happy connecting, then it's going to be up
Right.
to you to say, oh, Reagan, thank you so much. And that at that point, you can say, I really liked when I was watching the videos about what you said about the BDO culture, right?
Right.
You want to reference, like, look, all those recordings I've been doing, right?
Right.
All that stuff is to help you get yourself in the door. By the way, I had a student, right? And I'm not making this up. It was at UCI, which is problematic because he's taken all of his accounting courses at IVC because he's a biz econ major and he
Right.
cannot take accounting at UCI unless you're in biz admin, and good luck getting into that. That's like a 4.0 plus, right?
Right.
So especially now, and it's like, so he used those videos, contacted Reagan as an internship this summer, and he did that last summer. So
Right.
it's definitely, you can definitely do it. You just have to be extremely proactive, but you can't be
Okay.
pushy. You got to be
Right.
proactive.
Right. And so let's say like since I don't have an internship, where could I find like
No, you're trying to
experience?
get an internship for summer 26.
Right.
Right now, if like, look, job market is horrible. You're working at Ralph's. That's awesome.
Right.
Right. So you could go to Robert Half account temps. How many hours are you working a week right now at Ralph's?
About 30.
Okay. They probably don't want you working more than that because then you'd be considered to be a full-time employee.
Right. Yeah.
So what I would do is I would basically say, okay, I could go to Robert Half account temps. I could go to, I would take more Excel classes. I would do data analytics courses. I would try to really kind of hone up your skills. Spend the time researching these different firms. It's
Okay.
like, look, the fact that you have a job right now at Ralph's is awesome, right? Because
Right.
you're getting real, as a cashier, you're getting real accounting experience. You're basically collecting money and other payments.
Right. So I forgot. Totally blanking out now.
There's a lot of information, dude.
Right.
It's like you look at it and there's like just a ton of information in there, right? So
Right.
it's like, that's where you have to kind of say to yourself, like, okay, you just have to spend your time in those modules. There's so much information. But if you watch all those
Right.
videos and everything else, you kind of see that, like, what I'm sharing with you right now is kind of a culmination of all those different videos.
Right. Okay. I totally forgot my question, but when I remember, I will text it to you.
No, ask me now. Just what was it about? Was it about finding a job now, or is it the end of the world if you don't have a job, or what was it?
It was something about not having getting experience
No, you
in
have
the
experience.
industry.
No. Here's the thing.
Well, let's say like
Most,
being an assistant or something.
no. Listen. So most of the jobs, right? That,
Right.
like, look, when you go to an accounting firm, they assume as a brand new associate that you do not know anything, right?
Okay.
However, what is going to make you stand out? Number one, how strong are your financial accounting skills? How well do you know your debits and credits, right? And, that's really, if like when you took my classes, and this is really why when I make a recommendation, I can make it pretty comfortably because you suffered through my classes. You had to write out and prepare financial statements. You had to do a statement
Right.
of cash flows for the final exam. There were no multiple choice questions, which to me is the biggest BS way to teach accounting, which I'm sure you only did multiple choice in 301A, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, to me, that's an absolute disaster. And
Right.
they should be ashamed of themselves for doing that. And I don't mind saying that because if you're not testing, by the way, why do I say that? Like, because, well, guess what?
Is that like on the actual CPA? You have to do it by
Guess what?
hand or something?
When you go to the CPA exam, right, and you go to FAR, right, half of the questions are problem based.
Right.
And when you're at a school where you see a lot of students aren't passing the exam, it's like, dude, like, look in the mirror, right? You need
Right.
to be like giving problem-based testing, because if you don't, when students get to problems like this, they're not going to know what to do.
Right.
Because if you didn't suffer by handwriting out this stuff incessantly, like what I make my students do,
Right.
you're going to suffer. And like, but that's neither here nor there. What I would really kind of be sharing with you is that, you know, when it comes to like you walking into an accounting firm, they expect that you don't know anything, but you need to have like that willingness to learn. You need to be good at Excel. You need to be able to, if you talk to a supervisor and you keep on asking them the same question, when you're talking to someone, you better have pencil and paper out and taking notes when you're asking questions. Like right now, you're just chilling out, which is cool because you're not taking notes because I'm recording this, right?
Right. Yeah.
But if you're interviewing, you want to be taking notes, right?
Okay.
And if I was starting at my job, you want to be writing out notes. And the reason why is because you write out the notes because you don't want to go back to your supervisor incessantly. They're trying to train you to do a job, and then you're expected to kind of go through and do that job. If you're
Right.
untrainable, you're not going to be there. And by the way, there's right now, if someone dropped out of an internship because it's coming summer, there'll be 5 more people, 50 more people behind them to wanting to take it.
Right.
So there you go.
Right. So I wanted to ask, the last thing I wanted to ask was what like courses, like let's say on like LinkedIn, right? If there was any courses that you should take to kind of understand more of the accounting world and kind of enhance your skills.
If you watch everything that I've put in the modules of IBC 30 to CPA, and you spend time looking at publicly traded companies because you're going to be an auditor, right?
Right.
If you spend time doing those things and you start doing research about what auditors do, that's really what you need to be doing. There's
Okay.
no, like, if someone's selling you a course to take, I just
Right.
wouldn't do it. To me, I'm not saying it's a scam, but there's like, you go to sec.gov, like what I was just showing you right now. I mean, really, those are the things that you need to be doing. Like,
Right.
there's no magic. Like, look, when I first started teaching on the fly
Right.
to tell her that it's like, oh, you know, this is what's going to happen. You're going to meet a partner. You're going to meet a man.
I think you froze.
Students are recruiting. There's no more alcohol at recruiting events. By the way, those used to be wet. People would get wasted. I went to UC Santa Barbara. Holy crap. Everybody up there was like just getting completely.
Not surprised.
By the way, do not drink
Kind of froze again.
like soft kombucha, right? Um, you know, all those kinds of things. It's just like, you know, there's no magic bullet. If someone's selling you a course that's going to say, oh, this is going to prepare you for a job, no. If it's free, it's fine. You need to be taking as much Excel, spreadsheets, data analytics, like learn how to manipulate the data. Like
Right.
if you take the XBRL stuff off the SEC's website, can you turn that into something? I don't know.
Right.
But that's what I would be doing, is like really just trying to basically find those types of things that you can do proactively to basically set yourself up to, you know, when you interview, you're going to be genuine. You know, like, again, you don't want to make stuff up. You want to be genuine, but it's like, how are you going to set, you know, how are you going to set yourself apart? Now, look, you're working at Ralph's, which is great. And that's
Right.
a great experience because there's a lot of people that do not have those kind of job experience. You've worked a lot with the public. And so
Right.
that's something that you have to really kind of, and you work with a variety of people. So that's something you really have to kind of try to parlay into, you know, distinguishing yourself from the other candidates.
Right. I think that's really about it.
Cool. Mandeep, thank you again for allowing me to record this and put this up on YouTube. I appreciate it. It's obviously with all my videos, it's been way too long because I think this has gone over an hour, but that's awesome, right? I'd rather
Right.
have it be something like this so you could actually really go through and just kind of see, but you ask great questions. And I think that this is probably one of the more comprehensive conversations I've had with a student. So
Right.
I know this is going to help out other students. So thank you for allowing me to record this and make it public on YouTube.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mandeep, we'll talk soon. Actually, hold on.